George, so great to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
First time on the show. So what I like to do with first time guests is just first give us a little bit about your background and then talk to us about Prospero.ai.
Yeah, so I've been in finance for a long time. Actually, I worked at Columbia Business School when I was 16 for Bruce Greenwald, and 17 I taught myself accounting to work at my first fund. Been all over the place, did a lot of stuff on the buy side, and one of the things that led me to where I was today, where I am today, is just kind of the realization that even as a small hedge fund, I felt pretty disadvantaged versus the bigger guys. And the other thing is, as a value investor, I also felt like there were a lot of holes that I observed. And that's what kind of got me more interested in AI and what I would call kind of like underlying market equations. And that got me into AI about 15 years ago and really just kind of figuring out how we can find these relationships in the data that can inform better decisions. And that's ultimately the thinking that led to Prospera. We actually had a pretty modest goal at the start, and that was to just visualize in easy to learn ways, especially what institutions were doing in real time to just reduce, the extreme error rate. 70% of DIY investors lose. So you're just like, we could help some of those people by, basically teaching in easy ways and having kind of powerful signals in the background. And yeah, what it's turned into has been a lot better than that. The last 4 years, we're beating the market in our paper trading portfolio about 67% on average. So yeah, it's considerably the results were considerably better than minimizing error. And it's great. We have an app, we have a newsletter that kind of teaches people how to use and form portfolios from the signals in the app, and yeah, a lot more cool features coming down the pipe as well.
So one of the cool things is you're basically allowing people to pick stocks like a pro, right? So can you continue to thank you so much for the intro. Break that down for us. Like what's happening behind the scenes that is enabling that?
So what's happening behind the scenes is the simplification of a lot of complexity into 10 signals, right? But I'll just focus on one because I could talk all day on the 10, right? We have one called net option sentiment. And that's a really interesting story because a lot of what I think is unique about us is this co-evolution of starting with advanced back-end algorithms that, I did AI as a service for 8 years. So literally institutional grade algorithms, and then figuring out a way to turn them into an actual useful concept. And we're actually been around for 6 years. We're on V4 of our app. This was made by a former creative director at Apple. So we're really that concept simplification and kind of back end power is there, but it was actually invented because I used to teach. I mean, I still teach a lot of people how to invest one on one. That's one of the things that helps us with our products, and I learned, and I used to teach a lot of people options chains. And one day, it was a Friday afternoon, I was frustrated. I was trying to teach someone an options chain, and I was like, what if I just told you the options market's like this or didn't like this? And that person was like, yeah, it would be way easier if you could tell me that. We'd be wasting time. So I was like, great. And that's how our most powerful signal was invented. I was like, okay, I have a lot of these algorithms that are more focused on looking at what institutions are doing and visualizing that, not necessarily predicting price. And so we have a really representative number there that's quite informative. And that's gotten people, one of our most famous case studies was Alibaba in 2022, 2023, where we got people out in front of two major news events. We kind of saw them happening before they happened. This year, probably the newsletter that I'm most proud of was on March 30th. It was called Don't Trim the Hedges. And we were basically teaching people how to use inverse ETFs to hedge their, pure long risk. Obviously, I see you nodding. You know that Liberation Day and kind of a huge market downturn followed that. But we were out in front of that because our market level SPY, QQQ, net option sentiment readings were at the floor. So that's what enabled us to, basically help people in that way. So even just that one signal of the 10 is super helpful, but a lot of the other ones are simplifying concepts, like we have a dark pool rating, for example. A lot of people like know that word, but have no idea what that means. And similar to the options rating, it's just like, hey, you can use this number. You don't necessarily have to understand everything behind it.
Now, I want to tee up kind of what the future continues to look like, right? Because you're really building the future of investing tools, trade alerts, generative AI features, ETF. Like, what's the I already think this is a big vision, but I'm going to say, like, what's the bigger vision here? Like, where do you see this company going over the next several years?
So we actually have a really big vision where this is just phase one of our business. And we call it the trust building phase. And we're actually getting to the tail end of phase one. Phase two is actually like a lot of our products are free. Our app is all free. Where you allude to the alerts. That's going to be our first paid in-app product. But a lot of our high quality stuff, is free. And that's because one day we want to ask people questions like, say, what's your temperature? And model a pandemic in real time. And essentially do what the US senators were doing when they were looking at hospital data, reassuring the public, shorting the market. But instead of that private arbitrage, we would actually make that more of a public utility, which would incentivize more data sharing. So all of this is just like a big setup for that. And it's kind of all my years in investments, being around this stuff, technology. One truth that I've seen time and time again is I see a lot of, robo advisors, ETF, like a lot of like these startup investment things packaging and overcharging for something that is not going to be Vanguard on efficiency. That's not going to be, a fund that has like considerably more resources. And the example that I always use, you see these startup asset managers saying that they're going to, they haven't even raised $100 million total, and Bridgewater could lose that in a day and not bat an eye. It's like, how are you competing with that? So this is our logic. Be like, we want to get into asset management long term, but it's like, we think we will really be able to help people in that and have unique differentiated products because there'll be this evergreen alternative data source in a time when alternative data is becoming more and more valuable. So we're playing the long game on that. And we're prepared. We have been prepared to do it the hard way, which is like, we'll start off, we'll give a lot of value for free so you can trust us, and then we can share in this, community benefit later.
Really, really, really cool. And I want to make sure, George, that we tee up. I don't know what the legality is around it, but like something unique is you're not just raising capital, you're letting anyone really become a part of what you're building, be an owner in what you're building by raising capital through Republic, right? So I want to give you just a minute to talk a little bit about that and any upcoming deadlines. And I think I've had this talk with other founders in the past that were raising, but they weren't raising through crowdfunding. So I think we can actually talk a little bit more about it because you will have some place they can go to read more about the risks and everything like that as well. But I want to give you a minute to talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage anyone that is interested, in what I'm saying. And I'm just going to talk about, the company and the strategy more than around, but visit the link if it's there. But I think it's Republic. I don't have it memorized actually. Anyway, I'm
It's fine.
sure I'm sure we can share a link if you're interested. But yeah, a big part of, obviously a lot of this is community driven. But for us, it's not just that. Like one of the things that we're doing as part of the crowdfund is we are giving exclusive access to our flagship product alerts. Actually, the first batch just got a trial this week because in our estimation, we want people that believe in what we're doing. And, we already have had about 20% of the people invest in the crowdfund also leave reviews like from everything from, this has helped me learn to invest. I use this in my daily trading. I love the mission, everything there. Because we want that community, like longer term, we want people to be able to say, not only do I use this product, but I'm an owner of it as well. And I think that there aren't enough companies that are building community. And we view ourselves as building a community first and then products and services and education resources to serve that community.
Now, what do you think, like what is the question you get asked the most about what you've been building by it can be prospective investors, it could be users. What is something that if you had to just narrow it down to one of the most asked questions that you want to answer here today?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, has the same skepticism I mentioned with the startups. Like, why aren't you a hedge fund? Why is this access, whatever. And it's easy. I already told you the first part, right? Part of it is we're playing the long game, right? But the other thing I say is I was just like, you know what, use it for yourself. You don't believe, you don't believe our, we have an open source portfolio. Everybody could see the moves that we make. So it's like you can go back and review these, you can review the letters. We're very open, transparent about any ever. So do that. But if you still don't believe it, use the product. And the one thing that I tell everybody, and I say, I kind of alluded to some of the problems, I think, but I like to be very realistic in the promises. There are no magic bullets in investing, and our best power users know how to use the signals very well and know how to interpret the market with them. It's not like a single number you could look at. Nothing's that magic. Same thing for institutions, by the way. Traders will look at a bunch of stuff. They're never looking at one number, and a lot of it's going to be coalescing information. But the one promise that I make anyone is I was like, use it, integrate it into your process when you're making a decision. Check out the numbers, especially in an option sentiment. If you've used it for couple months and you don't come back to me and say that it's helped you get better, right? That's what we promise. It'll help you get better. Like, I'd be surprised. I've been saying that for years. Not one person has come back to me and said that it didn't help them get better.
I love it. George, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, sharing some more information. If there's any links you want me to include, we'll include those in the show notes as well so people can learn more if they're interested in investing, if they're interested in signing up, ideally both, right? That's nice when both of those happen. Definitely people should check out what you've been doing. Thank you for building what you've built so far and where you'll continue to take it from here. Really appreciate having you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jared.